Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be talking about today is the abduction of Ekaterina Martynova, who was known as Katia, and I will say this as her name throughout this video, and Elena Samokhina, who was known as Lena. Again, this is the name that I'll be using for her throughout this video. I'd just like to let you know that I've gathered all this information from the internet. I mean, no disrespect to anyone I'm going to talk about today. I've just gathered it up to make one video for educational purposes. Now, this case is actually a suggested case, and it was suggested by Kate Spencer. She wanted me to look into the crimes of Viktor Mokhov, so I'd like to thank you for that, Kate. I didn't know about this case before, and I did find it quite interesting. I'd also like to apologise if I get any of the pronunciations wrong for the names or places. I do really struggle with them sometimes, but I do try hard, but I still have issues, so please just bear with me if I do get things wrong. Viktor Mokhov was born on the 22nd of June in 1950 in Skopje, Russia. He actually graduated college as a miner, but all the mines around him were actually closed, and he decided that he didn't want to move, so he went into a different profession. And he went on to spend some time in the army. He then got a job working as a metal worker at the Skopje automobile assembly, and he was described as being a really good worker. He was always willing to help other people, and his foreman would often use him as kind of an example to other workers, as he was a really hard worker and his boss really did respect him for it. He was also on quite a decent amount of money from what I could find. As the end of the 1970s crept up, Viktor had gotten married, but it didn't really last very long, and within 3 months they actually got a divorce. His personal life wasn't going as well as he had hoped, I believe. So Viktor apparently watched a documentary about Alexander Komin, and Alexander was a Russian man who actually kept slaves in a bunker, and this bunker was underground. And after Viktor had watched and learned about a man who had complete power over the people that he kept enslaved down there, he kind of began craving the same thing. He imagined having his own bunker filled with sex slaves. He would later state that he wanted many children, and he wanted to improve the demographic situation of Russia. And that would kind of be a sick and twisted justification for the terrible things he went on to do, which I will go into a little later on. As I said, his personal life wasn't going too great. He was actually living with his mother at the time, and he decided that he would build his own personal prison in which he would lure women into, and that's how he would satisfy himself, I guess. Rather than just going out and trying to meet women, he decided that he was going to have them as sex slaves. So Viktor did like he thought he would. He went on to build a garage, and in this garage he built a secret underground bunker that was about 6 meters down. This would be the place where he would hold his abductees, and he would abuse and rape them. And the bunker was seriously well hidden. His mother lived with him, like I said. He wouldn't have wanted anyone stumbling onto it. He wouldn't have wanted her stumbling onto it. And whether she knew about what was happening or not, I will go into a little later on. You guys can decide what you think. So the bunker was surrounded by trees. It was surrounded by overgrowth. And you couldn't actually get to it by going inside the garage door, inside the garage itself. To get inside this bunker, you basically had to go around the side, and that's how you would get in there. But it would have been very inconspicuous to someone on the outside that had no clue that there was basically a dungeon underneath it. And around the side, there wasn't just a big gaping hole that you went into. There was a metal panel that you had to pry off with a screwdriver, and the panel was actually held there by magnets. So basically, it wouldn't just fall off. You had to physically, it must have been quite strong magnets, physically pry this panel off. And once the panel was off, that you came into a concrete kind of landing floor with a hatch. Once you got into this hatch, there was a stairway leading down to a narrow passageway that led to a next landing with a concrete wall, and this wall had 2 hatches on it. One of these was made from iron with a padlock and 2 latches, and this would actually be the entrance to the horror chamber in which he would rape and keep his victims. Inside this chamber were bunk beds, and over time Viktor would actually send things down like a kettle, a little stove, things like that, on kind of a pulley system. So he'd tie it to a rope and kind of lower it in. Victor's first known victim was a 16-year-old girl and actually occurred in December 1999. Now, this wouldn't actually be found out until much, much later. And you'll see the reasoning behind this. But even though it was his first victim, it wasn't his first known victim. So the girl went to visit Victor with her boyfriend. He plied them with alcohol before actually making moves on the girl. Now, she rebuffed him. She wasn't interested whatsoever, and her and her boyfriend left. But Victor didn't accept this. He followed her out into the street where he hit her over the head and dragged her to his bunker. And he actually did keep this girl there for 2 weeks. He would rape her numerous times throughout her captivity there. But luckily, she did actually manage to escape. And the reasoning behind her not being known was basically because she didn't report it to the police. So this crime, this bunker that Victor had, was never ever reported. Nobody knew about it except from her. So he was allowed to continue. Not that it's her fault. She probably would have been frightened what he might do to her, things like that. Obviously, I'm not blaming her, but maybe if she would have reported it, it could have prevented what did happen. Again, please don't think I'm blaming her, because I'm really not. I understand the situation she must have been in. She must have been terrified. On the 30th of September 2000, Victor would strike again. Katia was 14-year-old and was a school student. Elena was 17-year-old at the time, and she attended Ryazan Professional Technical Institute. The girls were coming home from a party, and Victor had offered to give them a ride. He was in the car with his friend and accomplice, 25-year-old Elena Samokhina, who actually introduced herself to the girls as Lyosha. Now, I did find that offering people a ride in Russia is a cultural practice, and it isn't out of the ordinary. So to the girls, it was just a normal thing. Where over, say in England or something like that, you wouldn't ever get into the car, or you would hope that you'd never get into the car with a complete stranger, but over there, it seems like it was pretty normal. So when they got in the car, he offered them both drinks. And I believe that the girls said that they didn't really drink, but he kind of insisted and just said, just take a sip. Obviously, Katia was only 14 at the time, so she did as he asked, and they did drink the vodka, but little did they know it was actually laced with a sedative. He drove the girls back to the house, dragged one into the garage and one into the bunker. It's kind of thought that maybe Elena helped to move the girls into the bunker, but I can't confirm this. We don't actually know whether she was there, whether she did help him, so I can't confirm this as being true. But it is kind of thought by a lot of people that she did help. When the girls came round, they found themselves locked in the bunker. They sat in the damp, pitch black for several hours before he finally returned. He ordered Lena to leave. He raped her right there on the concrete floor. He then shoved her back in the bunker and ordered Katia to do the same. And he also raped Katia right there on the concrete floor. Victor would rape the girls so many times that it basically, as horrible as it sounds, would become part of their daily routine. And that's just disgusting to even think about. If the girls would comply with his orders, they would get privileges. He'd give them a TV, tape recorders, paints, books, things like that. But if they refused him, he would do horrible, horrible things to them. He would starve them. He would cut off the electricity to the bunker, forcing them to stay in the darkness for hours on end. He would beat them with a rubber hose and even spray tear gas into the bunker. Dare I say, one of the more horrific things that he did, in my eyes at least, was turning off the air pump to the bunker. This would mean that the girls would be able to barely breathe. And that's just horrific to even think about, for them to be sat down there as the air is running low and just suffering like that. It's just horrible. I mean, I know they suffered all sorts of things, but I just feel like that one is one of the worst that I'm aware about. I don't know what you guys think. So he cut off their air supply just because they didn't want to be raped. It's just horrible. After about a month into their ordeal, I have read that they did actually try to strangle him, but he was just too strong. They tried to persuade him to let them go. They said that they wouldn't contact the police, but he would simply laugh in the face and say, "I'll let you go in 20 years when each of you have given me 10 kids." The girls would try to distract themselves. They would exercise, they'd write poems, they'd read books, just to try and cope with their horrific circumstances. They even drew, and they would put some of these drawings up around the bunker, around the cell, trying to make it this horrible place kind of a sliver nicer for them, because they had to stay there, so they just tried to make it as nice as they possibly could. Now, because of the horrific conditions they were forced to endure, it suppressed Katya's puberty. He raped them repeatedly, but Lena was older. She would actually give birth to 2 of his children, on the 6th of November 2001, and again on the 6th of June 2003. Viktor would leave Katya alone to deliver both babies with nothing but a medical manual. Both babies were baby boys. He took the first boy away after only 2 months with his mother. And the second boy he actually left with Lena for 4 months before he then took that one away as well. He dumped them at the entrance of a multi-storey apartment, and both of these children ended up in an orphanage, which I do find really sad. Obviously, when they were found, no one knew anything about them. These children were the product of abuse and rape. With a man, the mother didn't want to father her children, if she wanted children at all. But obviously it wasn't the children's fault. They were also victims of this man. Lena actually said whilst the children were inside her, she felt like they weren't really hers. She felt like this man had put them in there against her will, which he did, and that they would always remind her of Viktor. She had a terrible sense of loss and guilt over the boys. Obviously she didn't get to spend much time with them, and that probably didn't help either, because she never really got the time, the chance to form that bond with them and love them as her own. Like I said, in her eyes, they weren't hers and they were forced on her by him. And obviously that's not the children's fault, but it's also not Lena's fault. And you can never blame Lena for leaving these children at the orphanage, even after she did manage to escape, because she suffered at the hands of this man for a very long time, and sometimes you just can't deal with it. Just such a horrible and difficult situation for all of those involved. At the beginning of 2003, Viktor, I guess, began trusting the girls a bit more. They'd been held captive for a few years now. He started taking them out for walks, but he would only take one at a time from what I could gather. He didn't trust them both to be at the same time, maybe want to try and escape, maybe wanted to say something. So it was more under his control to just take one out and then maybe come back for the other and take the other one out. And at this point, they'd been inside for so long, they'd not seen the sun for so long, that the skin was practically green from the lack of sun. One time whilst he was out with Katya, he basically told her to help him to seduce a female student. He wanted to increase his number as sex slaves, as he would call them. She introduced herself as Viktor's relative. And this is where I don't know how long down the line, but she saw her opportunity to escape. So at some point she was able to gift an audio cassette tape to this girl, and Viktor probably thought this was a good idea. Giving this girl gifts may have been kind of the key to luring her into his bunker. However, little did he know it would actually be his downfall, because hidden within the cassette was a note that actually read, "Viktor's not my uncle. He keeps us in his basement from September 2000 onwards. He can kill us and you. Take this note to the police." This girl immediately did as she was asked. She went and took it to the police. And obviously they launched an investigation straight away. They started looking into the case and searching for the girls and Viktor, and eventually they did find them. Viktor was arrested, and sometime later so was his accomplice. Lena, at the time of her being released, was 8 months pregnant, but the child would unfortunately be a stillborn. Viktor Mokhov was sentenced to 17 years in a penal colony. Elena Samokhina was sentenced to 5.5 years for her involvement. And I presume this is enabling him, kind of assisting him, and never actually reporting it to the police. She was there when he drugged the girls. That is for sure. So she knew about it and she never reported it. As far as anything else, the extent that she was involved, obviously I'm not sure. And if you guys know, please do let me know in the comments. Viktor did appeal, but the regional court didn't change its sentence. Viktor's mother, Elena Samokhina, basically denied that she knew anything about what had happened, and no charges were actually filed against her. Now, this is up to you guys as to whether you believe her or not. Whether you believe she was able to live in the same house and basically not know what was going on. Like I said, the garage was a garage on the outside. The entrance to the bunker was at the side. It was shrouded with shrubbery. It was littered with rubbish by all accounts. And she was also quite elderly. She was 80 years old, and I wouldn't like to assume what her health was like, but she may not have been the most mobile. She also did claim that when she saw the girls wandering around the yard, she just thought they were an acquaintance of her son's and didn't really think much of it. We just don't really know the true facts, and like I said, you can make your own judgments on if you think she knew anything, but again, she was cleared of all charges. After a couple of years into the freedom, interviews and things like that were done. It was found out that Lena actually made the agonising decision to not try and find her two sons, who have since been adopted. She said that they deserved a chance at a decent life, and she didn't know if she was strong enough to provide that for them and to give them what they needed. By the time she was freed, basically her boyfriend presumed she was dead and he had got with another woman. And she said that it seemed surreal that she now had a normal life ahead of her. She basically thought it was impossible to ever trust a man again, and she really did think that she'd never get out there and that she'd even die down there. At the age of 23, she was finally ready to move on, and she decided to train to become a teacher, and this was where she met her husband, Dima, and I believe that was actually through Katia. She was able to find love again, and by all accounts is even considering having children with him, which obviously is a super sore subject for Lena. But I do believe that the girls don't really speak anymore. It's now been 17 years since the girls were released, and Viktor is actually set to be released in 2021. Katia went on to write a book about her ordeal, and she actually revealed that her captor wrote to her in 2017. She's now married with 2 children, and although she is worried about his imminent release, she states that her and her family have moved and that they are safe. Her motto is only forwards, and she is also writing a second book. This case was just horrific. These girls were physically and mentally abused, and I did find it quite shocking that he got away with it for as long as he did. There's been so many cases like this. I covered the Elizabeth Fritzl case, I covered the Lydia Garado case, and they got away with it for so long, it's just insane. And it just goes to show that you never really truly know the people around you. I'm really glad that Katia did what she did, and when she saw her means to escape, she went for it. And this actually enabled them to be found, because who knows how long he would have kept them under there. Who knows how many more victims he would have gained if Katia hadn't have done what she did. I'm so thankful, honestly, that these women have been able to find peace over the years, and have been mostly been able to put it behind them and find love, find a family, far away from their horrible experience. This is all we can really hope for with such terrible cases. And it does seem that these women were actually able to find it. What happened to them was utterly disgusting and will haunt them, probably for the rest of their lives. But at least they got out alive, they were able to move on in a sense and build their own families. And not let Viktor ruin their entire lives. Please do let me know if I've missed any information. With language barriers and things like that, it can sometimes be quite difficult to research, but I've done my best. So if I've missed anything, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Please let me know if you have any more suggested cases. I do enjoy looking into suggested cases because some of them I've never even heard of before, like this one. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Ekaterina Martynova and Elena Samokhina. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!